Hello, everyone. Welcome back to that was kind of shitty. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Just Another Esports podcast. Once again, you're joined by me, your host, Nicholas Shady Bacon, and my co host, Mr. Kevin Hubris. 2 weekends ago, we saw the conclusion of Stage 1 with their major. It had a lot of very exciting and some very boring matchups. Even the boring ones were kind of exciting. Those were the 3-0s I would classify as usually boring, but they were kind of exciting because a lot of them were upsets. You had quite a few upsets, I would say, this weekend, at least based on our predictions, which after the first day were pretty bad, at least on my end. I think, yeah, after the first day, I only got one matchup 100% correct. And then I think you probably got maybe a couple others in there, since I know you kind of went the other way on that Florida-Paris matchup.
Yep.
But a bunch of crazy matches that happened during that weekend. We're going to recap kind of what occurred, give our takes on some of the outcomes that we did see, and then we'll dive into some of the changes moving into Stage 2 with some of the roster swaps and some of the new bans, and then we'll be giving our predictions for this upcoming weekend of matches for the commencement of Stage 2. So, moving in to the Stage 1 major, the first day we had Toronto versus London and Seattle versus Florida. This was the only day that either of us got 100% correct, I do believe. We both said Toronto was going to beat London, and we both said Florida was going to beat Seattle. Toronto came out on top of London in 3-2 fashion, and Florida came on top of Seattle in 3-1 fashion. And I think one of the big takeaways here was London, they had only 15 minutes of practice, so says their manager Shane, with their new fourth Zed, because Alex had to go back to the UK for some family issues. So London is not looking like they're in a very good spot right now.
Well, you heard, right?
What did I hear?
About Haggy getting dropped?
Yes, they are bringing in Paul X, I believe.
Yep, Polyx.
So
Honestly, yeah, rough start for London in the first major, and everything leading up to it. But I mean, hopefully they get these visa issues settled with Zero, and then they move forward with Polyhex, who's absolutely gross at this game. And then I mean, who knows? I mean, this could be a completely new London team coming the second split.
yeah, it's kind of a weird thing to see. I mean, once Zero comes back, who's he? Well, he's probably not. You'd think he would sub out for Paul X, and then once Alex gets back, you'd imagine you'd come back in. But they're kind of throwing in bits and pieces here and there, and really changing. I mean, the starting roster is 50% different from what it was at the start of the season, which is pretty crazy since we're only probably a month into the actual season. But
Right.
yeah, it's very, I guess,
Tumultuous.
unfortunate for London that they've had to have so many things kind of get in the way of them performing how they want to, with just limited practice time, not being able to have the roster that they want. They're starting with a huge deficit, kind of with the goal of making champs, since only 8 teams, I believe, are actually going to make
Right.
it to champs this year. So they definitely don't want to end up in that bottom 8. And London have definitely dug themselves a pretty big hole. Actually, they've had it dug for them, and they're kind of just being pushed into it at the time.
Right. Yeah,
But
it's kind of scary to see. Like, I mean, London is like they have a good fan base. They have a crowd that supports them. They have a good org, and they've just kind of run into I mean, shit luck for the most part. I mean, I'm not gonna blame it all on that. There's obviously things that can happen. These are all professional players who have played the game at the highest level. So, you can't really be like, oh yeah, it's yeah, 15 minutes of practice, whatever, all that fun stuff. But I'm not gonna discount them yet. It's still really early in the season, and who knows? Maybe they figure it out. Maybe they don't. They didn't last year, so
Yeah, I mean they did end up getting fourth at champs, so I mean I think that's a placement that a lot of people weren't expecting from
True.
that roster. Um, but yeah, they're definitely in a huge deficit right now that they need to get themselves out of. But talking about Paul X, I guess very briefly, I'm not too familiar with him as a player, so kind of what role does he run, and how do you think he's really going to help this London Royal Ravens roster?
So, Paul played for Wester. Um, the infamous Challengers team that won the first 4 cups in a row, and then kind of broke up. Not really suddenly, but they started to have some poor performances, and then they all just, the usual like Challengers tragedy, so to speak. A couple of them had already been given offers to play on professional teams back when they were Wester, and they said, nah, like, we'll stick with my boys, like, we're a package deal, and then all of a sudden it fell apart. Now, Prolute's getting shipped around, Polyhex is getting shipped around, Zaptius, who knows what's going on with that guy. Uh, so seeing Paul come up as he's primarily a sub player, if I recall correctly. Um, so seeing Paul come up and hopefully he can kind of fix some of their objective problems, maybe their map tempo issues. Uh, there's going to be things that he'll bring to the table that I imagine will greatly help the Ravens. So I think this is a big pickup, and I'm always a big fan of seeing guys from the Challengers come up and do well for their professional org. They have their chance. Are they going to take it? Hopefully they do. Hopefully Paul does. Best of luck to him. Best of luck to the Ravens the rest of the season.
Okay. Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how he performs moving into stage two. But those were our two Wednesday matchups. Moving on to our Thursday matchups, we had the LA Thieves versus LAG, the Battle of LA. And then
Oh
we had the
no.
Battle of Pizza with Chicago and New York.
Oh my
I'm going
God.
to keep on calling it that until it catches on. We had Paris versus Florida and Minnesota versus Toronto. So kind of, I guess we'll start with the biggest upset. I think, well, second biggest or biggest upset
Probably
of the
biggest.
weekend was LA Thieves losing to the LA Gorillas. And we kind of shit on the LA Gorillas the last podcast. I mean, you were saying App should retire. All like I was saying, there's probably a bunch of players that maybe don't belong in the league on that team. And here they are beating what we were probably considering one of the top
Top four.
five teams in
Yeah,
the
top
league
five. Yeah.
in LA Thieves. And they just got destroyed. And I mean, this came out of some really solid fundamentals out of LAG. And like, in your opinion, do you think at this point LAG is kind of the most fundamentally sound team in the league and potentially the real deal, or do you like
Nah.
the thing that I always have an issue with is like teams with strong fundamentals. You kind of look at Minnesota Rocker like last year. There's probably
Optic
some
this
other
year.
good
Oh my
examples,
God.
but you look at teams with really good fundamentals kind of at the start of the season, uh, and then it gets to a point later in the season where maybe like the less disciplined squads finally get around to that point, to those to the to a point where they also have strong fundamentals, but then their slaying power is just better than than the other teams that maybe figured the game out earlier on. Do you think that's kind of what we're going to see from this LAG roster?
I think that this one-off, as I'm gonna call it, this one-off is pretty much that. I don't see them repeating success like this, and nothing against the guys or anything. I just, I mean, the Thieves, they play really inconsistently at times, and we've seen that with TJ. I don't know, since BO4. Um, so it's one of those things that, yeah, I mean, sometimes the Thieves just shit the bed, and you're gonna have that whenever you have inconsistent players, and I think that's the story that unfolds with this battle for LA, as we'd like to call it. I'm not gonna dog on LAG. I just think that like one match or the performance in the major just in general isn't gonna dictate how well the team's going to perform in the long run. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, this was the team. I mean, we kind of overlooked them maybe a bit coming out of stage one. I mean, they did end third in their group, over Florida, over Toronto, and over who was the other team in Group B? I can't remember. I think it was probably, I think it was London,
London or
maybe.
Paris?
No, it wasn't London. Yeah, it was Paris. Paris was in the group, so they finished on top of all of those teams, which I think we definitely wouldn't consider LAG better than any of those teams, but that's kind of what ended up happening. And they later on into the tournament, I mean, they took a map off phase, and the maps kind of looked competitive in a sense. Like I don't think phase really blew them out in any of those matches, but yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how far kind of LAG's teamwork and fundamentals can take them as the season progresses. And maybe we'll be kind of eating our words later on. I mean, this is
Should.
3/4 of a roster that won the last boots on the ground 4v4 COD. So maybe they got the magic in them. Who knows? But yeah, talking about the LA Thieves, they look pretty freaking clueless in control. That's
Yeah.
kind of one of the things I noticed this weekend. That was a glaring weakness with that lineup. And also, you do not want Temp to be doing the best on your team. Temp
Yeah.
is for that team. He's definitely the flex. He's more so kind of the one filling in the gaps where the other players are failing, in my eyes. And so if he's the one doing the best on their team, that means that the three other players are usually failing at doing their job correctly. So that's something that I'm going to continue to pay attention to with this LAT's lineup. Um, so yeah, uh, I think that's just kind of one of the points that I wanted to bring up with there. I mean, there's always something to talk about with LATs between kind of them just flopping at times, the inconsistencies between Slasher's comments and whatnot. One of them being this time around, I'll bring it up now since I don't feel like talking about it later. Talking about, and I will agree with that this shouldn't occur, but the differences between complaining about practice versus matches server difference, being that I believe the refresh rates on the practice servers are different from the ones that they're playing their official matches are on, which can cause differences in, I think, the spawning patterns because of how frequently the server updates. I think it can maybe cause some slight differences that they're seeing. I don't think like the spawn logic is any different. I think just because of the difference in the refresh rate, it might be causing some slight differences between uh, their practice matches and their official matches. But like, while I agree that there shouldn't be a difference between those, like they should be able to practice what they play on, it's not just them that are experiencing this issue. So
Right.
you can't say, "Oh, we're not getting quality practice because of this issue." I mean, yes, you are, but it's also like an issue everyone else in the league is dealing with. So you're still on an even playing field. So I hope it's more so just a complaint like, "Hey, we shouldn't have to deal with these differences between practice and matches," and not like, "Oh, this is the reason we're losing," because I think
Sure.
that's probably just a terrible mindset to have.
Yeah, and I don't know. I've played with guys that have that same sort of mentality, like, oh well, I was just, you know, like, oh, well, like my controller settings were off or something like that, or something to that effect, or all this other crazy stuff. Oh, like I'm playing on like 120 ping, and I was like,
I can
dude.
tell you Josh's. I can tell you Josh's right now. Little Salvation's Elite. Dude, every time we played at any of the lands that we were refereeing, like sometimes in our downtime we would have time to hop on a console and maybe get some of the other refs in and play some
Yeah, play some
4v4
eights
or
or something like
something.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or yeah, play some eights, or maybe me and him were 1v1ing or something just
Right.
for fun. Anytime I would outgun him, it'd always be it'd be different if I have my scuff. If I have my scuff, it'd be different.
Oh, okay. I see how it is. Why didn't he bring it? What? Why didn't he bring his scuff then? Jeez, it's not like it's like gonna
I'm
take that
very
much space in your
adamant
bag.
against scuffs. Yeah.
Nah, Battle Beaver
Okay,
gang all
John.
the way, 100p.
Nah, well, I'm against like any of the modified
All right,
controllers.
never mind, you're banned. Cool.
But yeah, that's yeah, I completely understand. There's definitely people out there with that kind of mindset. But
What? I mean,
I think
yeah,
I cut you off
absolutely.
there. But did you have anything else that to kind of expand upon that point, or did you want to continue it?
No, we'll talk about the Battle of the Pizza. God.
Okay. All right. Well, the first time Chicago New York faced off, it was a really quick 3-0 in favor of Chicago. So the start of Thursday were 2 3-0s, one expected, one unexpected. And like later on, we have a rematch for Chicago and New York, and it did not go as expected
Right.
from what you would probably expect before the Thursday matchup happened, and even more so after the Thursday matchup happened. But moving on to our other Thursday matchups, it was Florida that came on top of Paris in 3-1 fashion. I think that was the game where you just saw how heavily Caesar Skies has invested in his game
And
and
yeah.
just completely torched them on Raid Hardpoint.
No,
And
that was against
then,
Seattle.
oh, was that against Seattle?
Yeah,
My
so
bad.
I remember so it was funny. Octane was actually talking about it in on his YouTube channel, and he was saying that Prestini had his controller settings changed. Talk about making excuses. He had his controller settings changed, so they were down in a 3v4 whenever Skies dropped what 11 on him, 10 or 11 on him in a row. Um, and I mean,
Wasn't that like the fourth hardpoint though?
yeah, that was the fourth.
How did
So
his controller settings magically get changed?
I I don't know. I don't know. It was a bloodbath, and they started up like absolutely insane. Skies made huge plays. Awakening made huge plays in the control. We didn't even talk about that game, but I mean, I don't think you want to talk about that as a Seattle fan because that was embarrassing.
I mean, I've given up on the Seattle roster. I'm just more of a fan of the logo now.
That's true. That's true. They do have some. They do have some cool ass gear. But yeah, no, the Florida Paris one. This one was This one was kind of hot, honestly. Florida just kind of did their thing, and Paris is still struggling to find footing in the league. Uh, is this going to be a consistent thing for Paris? Absolutely. I don't think that aside from some one-offs, I've always been a firm believer that any team can beat any given team on any given Sunday. It can happen. Things do happen. Players play inconsistently. Some players are on fire some days. And it's not like any of these guys are cheating or anything. They have their own like CDL like gaming PCs and all that. Like they got onto scraps for what? Like downloading GTA or whatever. We talked about that recently.
Yeah.
So I don't know about Paris. Paris just seems like um, in the beginning of the season or preseason, they didn't have a team. They were the last people to register a team. I thought that the org was going under. I was like really excited to see where the org was going because of all the LA Thieves, Optic, crazy stuff. I was like, well, maybe another org can do that. And the writing was kind of on the wall for Paris. I'd imagine that this is probably the last year the Paris Legion exists. Um, so I mean, to see them get beat by Florida is kind of just like, well, Florida's a contender and Paris is doing the bare minimum. So, I mean,
Yeah.
you tell me who's going to win that, Nick.
I mean, I would say Florida, but Florida had been struggling up until this point. They definitely turned it on, I guess you could say, in this major, but I
Yeah.
mean, they didn't make it past the next team who they face after they face
Subliners.
Paris.
Subliners were hot, hot.
Yeah, they face subliners. And I mean, you look at the Florida lineup, it's really a one-man show, sometimes a two-man show when Skies is on point, but it's
True.
really just been Awakening. I mean, Slack's definitely been doing a lot of the dirty work behind the
Yep.
scenes. I can't remember one of the stats that came up, but he's been doing a lot of objective play
Right.
in pretty much all the game types. And then I think Neptune's had like a couple of impressive moments during stage one, but it's really kind of been Awakening. I mean, you had the Lion Man cards come out or whatever,
Right.
and
Oh
Awakening's
man,
over there at a 99. Everyone else on the team's over at like a low 80, high 70.
dude, those lion cards are. I live for those. That's
Yeah,
that's
they're
that's all I
all
have left.
stat based, so it's obviously stats aren't the whole story, but it's still kind of just fun. Like he's doing extremely well statistics
Yeah,
wise,
yeah,
so
for sure.
he's definitely doing something to help the team if his stats are usually that high. You would think. I mean, maybe not. I mean, you look at Octane sometime in the past, and he's over at like a 2 KD, and the team's still getting shit on. So I don't know. That there's definitely needs to be some improvements in Florida, but they were definitely on fire during this Paris matchup. But moving on to the Battle of the North, lots of battles happening on Thursday. The Battle of the North, Minnesota versus Toronto, and this time around, Toronto takes it up against Minnesota. They took it 3-2. So this is another S&D that Minnesota has lost. They're still losing hard points, and they're iffy in control. You see any sort of hope for this Minnesota Rocker lineup? Because I was watching the Best of Three podcast uh, just, I think, a couple days ago. Shout out Josh and all those guys over there, Bash and Rex. And I believe it was Bash that put Minnesota down in like 9th or 10th on his power rankings.
I mean, makes sense for the way they're playing currently. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I don't really disagree with that at this point.
we said that accuracy would have this would be a good COD game for him because it's a little bit slowed down. And who knows with the meta change and all of that stuff. I mean, you would have thought that Major Maniac would have felt great with an XM4 in hand. You would have felt that you would have thought that like Priesta would have done really well with an XM4 in hand. Any of these guys, but I mean, it's just um, I don't know. Like there's, it's hard to like pinpoint what the problem is. They're playing good COD, but they aren't playing good enough COD, if that makes sense.
I think their pacings just don't mesh,
Yeah, that's
is the
probably it.
issue. Like accuracy, I think is like you have Major Maniac, you have Priesta, and you have Attach. All those are very fast players. I think Priesta is being a little too fast and over aggressive because he's probably used to having, I mean, Simp and Abeezy as his even has like supersonic subs.
Right.
So he's been making a lot of like odd aggressive plays that I don't think he should be making for kind of the positioning and pacing of like the rest of the players on his team. I think he's also just having a really tough time with this COD. I'm not entirely sure on the reason why. I mean, I know Crowder's kind of brought it up at times in the past where like he and Priest would sit down for literally like months and just go over gameplay to like help him improve. I think that was like something they did back during World War II, like on that phase roster when Priesta might have been struggling like at first, and then he obviously improved drastically kind of throughout that season. But maybe maybe that's something that needs to happen. But it's definitely not looking good for this Minnesota lineup
True.
since I don't think their strategy is really going to evolve throughout the season. Since I don't have a ton of faith in their coach Brian Saints, since that's something that we've seen quite frequently with his rosters in the past, is that there's not they usually start to fall off at the latter half of the season.
True. I mean, it's just we've touched on that before. I mean, he's kind of like a one-trick pony and all of that stuff. And I mean, a lot of these players. I mean, I would argue that Major Maniac is probably the most cerebral player on the team, and I mean, Attach is kind of like the run and gun. You know, he's dependent on his team a lot for the ability to play objectives and everything while he slays out. And I mean, you know, Attach is just he's not who he used to be. That's just a fair criticism. Accuracy can't do it all. I mean, we saw Seattle Surge last year. I mean, they had one AR and they couldn't do anything else. So accuracy's kind of in that boat. And
I mean, I would disagree with on the Attach point. I think Attach has been playing. I think Attach has probably been the best player on that team. so far this year.
Yeah, but I mean, none of them are doing that well.
No, none of them are doing that well. But especially I think as a team, like you can look at players that are doing better than other players on the team individually, but what does that even mean sense? That means, I mean, you have Priesta that's been suffering kind of throughout the entire season on that roster. So saying they're doing better than other players on their team isn't saying too much. But
True, yeah, but I mean, like they're all kind of like middling right now. I don't think that they're the worst team, but they're definitely not as good
no,
as
I don't think
we
they're the
hyped them up
worst
to be.
team. I think honestly, it's the return of the soup.
True.
The soup has returned, and I'm going to post the question: is New York the chef? Are they the chef of the soup?
Placer is for sure, but I don't know about the rest of the New York lineup. I mean, they're good.
Placer over there with his ladle, stirring up the pot.
Placer is playing with a chip on his shoulder, a massive chip on his shoulder. I mean, to get dropped after champs, I mean, had to happen.
I mean,
It was
yeah,
gonna
I
happen.
mean, he's said that this was the easiest kind of roster he's been quote unquote kicked from,
Right.
uh, since it was like the easiest to understand in a sense.
Right. I mean, you're not going to kick
And
Rookie of the Year MVP
yeah,
Shotzi. Illy is, well, honestly, after this performance, Illy, or this major performance, Illy is kind of like, you don't kick Crim Six because, I mean, I guess he's the greatest of all time. And I mean, obviously, you don't kick Hook the Nuke because, I mean, he's Hook the Nuke. Like, I don't have to say anything, especially with how he's been performing in this major.
yeah,
So,
this might be Hook's best COD,
yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of scary how
Definitely a
insane he is.
huge step up from kind of the performance we'd seen, not last year, but the 2 years prior to that. I mean, he didn't have a stellar BO2, or he didn't have a stellar World War II, and he didn't have a stellar BO4. So this has definitely been a huge step up for him performance wise, and I think his mentality is a lot better. He's in a lot better place right now too. But yeah, I don't know how we got to New York. I think, I brought something up about soup, but I think we should head back
Yeah,
to the matches. You good with that?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Friday we had Dallas for Chicago. That went all the way to a game 5. Unfortunately for my predictions, I had Chicago taking it. Dallas took it in the end. Really close matchup there.
Yeah, that was the best
And
game all
then,
series. Best of five, I should say.
yeah,
Actually, you know what? That was the
yeah.
best game
Well,
all
that was
major.
the only. Okay, no. There were three other game 5s. One was Toronto, London. One was at Minnesota, Toronto. And then the other one was New York, Florida. So there weren't a lot of game 5s this
I
weekend.
mean,
There were actually more 3-0s than there were game 5s.
this one
We
came down
had,
to a round 11, though. I mean, this one was
yeah,
like
it went the
perfect.
distance.
This was great. I loved it. Every minute of it.
Yeah, definitely a really good, fun series to watch. After that, we saw Atlanta FaZe versus LAG. They won that 3-1. So LAG did put up a good fight there, but we kind of already talked about that with that roster. I think something we can just say is Atlanta's looking absolutely filthy right now. I mean, they're what, 11-1 in SND. So that's like
They're
a
virtually unbeatable.
89% win record in search. Chicago is almost 100% win to loss in control after stage 1.
Yep.
If they hadn't lost to Dallas in that game 3 control, then I think they lost in the 5th round. So yeah, that was a really close control there too.
Yeah, no.
Crazy stuff.
That's what I'm saying. That Dallas Chicago matchup was the one of the tightest COD matches I have ever seen. It was neck and neck. They were just exchanging blows. Um, there's no denying that there are three top teams in this league at this point, and this match really showcased it.
Yeah, I think like we've seen Chicago and we've seen Dallas bleed at times. We haven't seen Atlanta bleed yet. Is the thing.
Yeah,
So
except whenever they were like joking around in the kickoff weekend against Florida.
yeah,
We were
against
like,
Florida.
whoa, and then all of a
Like,
sudden
oh
we were
my
like, oh wait,
gosh,
never mind.
Florida is insane, and then and then stage 1 comes around. We're like, "Ah,
Um,
Florida's kind of shit."
yeah,
Uh,
I mean, like Atlanta just they did what they were gonna do against anybody in that position. It was just unfortunate that it was LAG that that had to fall on the sword there. It would have been the Thieves if it wasn't LAG. Um, it was a 3-1 at least. What map did
yeah,
they pull from them?
I'm not
Hard point?
sure.
Probably the hard point.
Yeah, I think it was probably the hard.
The
Yeah,
first hard point.
was it the first hard point?
I mean, it couldn't have been the fourth
Yeah,
hard
it
point.
had to have been. Well, yeah, unless they were the one team that won an S&D, but I don't think they were.
No. LAG's S&D is not
It
that
could have
good.
been the control, but I think the control was the one that Simp just went absolutely
Yeah,
off
that's what
on
I'm saying. I'm
because
pretty
he had
sure I
like a
remember.
bad map 1 or something.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. I just think that like something was off, and then they were just like, "All right, hold on 1 second. Like, we're the
Yeah,
Fays. These are the Gorillas. Like, let's just play how we normally play." And then they just smoked them. So
yeah. Matchup after that, we had New York versus Florida Mutineers. That went to game 5. New York ended up coming out on top 3-2 in the end there. So that's the end of Florida's run.
which
And then,
I do want to say something about Florida though. So Florida takes an out here in yeah, because they don't play after this. This was their last game that they played, and they played against the Subliners, and the Subliners were arguably if the finals were on Saturday, the Subliners probably would have won the Stage 1 major because they were playing absolutely out of their minds on Saturday. Like they made an incredible run through the losers bracket and just dogged on everybody. So the fact that Florida put up a pretty good performance against a very very hot Subliners team, um, I'm definitely not mad at their performance. Do they have things they need to improve on? Yeah, absolutely. Every team does, including FaZe. But I mean, to take them to a 3-2, that gives you a little bit of hope for Florida at least, especially with how hot the Subliners are playing.
yeah, well, I mean, they came out really flat on Thursday. Friday, they went game 5 against Florida. And then it wasn't really until Saturday where they came out hot. And I think Chicago came out extremely flat as well,
True.
as we'll get to that after. I think what do we have here? We have Los Angeles
Toronto,
Thieves versus Toronto. That was a 3-0.
hot 3-0.
Yeah, hot 3-0 there.
Rip Zenny.
Yeah, don't really, yeah, rest in peace, Zinni. Don't really know kind of what to make. You just have two inconsistent rosters being inconsistent. I think
Yo, okay,
LA
so
Thieves' peak is definitely higher than Toronto's, and so that's probably just
we have to talk about Anthony Zenny methods. Like getting dropped from Toronto is the absolute dumbest thing I've seen in I don't know how long. It is actually brain dead for Toronto to drop your franchise player, the best player on your team, for what? Like,
I mean, if you were to kind of tell me a roster would drop their quote unquote franchise player or bench, he's not dropped, he's just benched,
sure, he's
is half.
benched. He's playing
And
challengers.
you told me who would it be or like what team? I probably would say Toronto because they have by far been the most kind uh flexible team in moving their roster around. They have
Sure,
used their roster swapping abilities more than anyone in the league. How many roster changes did they have last season with their 10-man roster? Four,
true.
five, six? They swapped pretty much everyone in at least one point in the season outside of just like 2 or 3 players. So, I mean, it makes sense, I guess, in that aspect of like they are the team to make roster changes. That's what they do. And if it doesn't work, then Zinni would probably come back in. I think the important thing here is for Zinni to not take this personally, to look at it as just the coaching staff moving players around to try and make a better team, potentially figuring things out, and to not look at it as the players don't want to play with him. Like, I hope like that's potentially not what's happening here, since I think that causes a lot of issues if players are making these kind of decisions when you want to have a flexible roster. You can't really have the players be making those decisions when you want to have a flexible roster and potentially bring a player back in, because there's just going to be that kind of like resentment in the back of their mind at all times. Like, these guys dropped me at one point. Like, what's stopping them from doing it again?
Right, and that's the thing that you have to kind of think of. I mean, honestly, I think Method's time in Toronto is kind of chalked at this point because I mean, he put up a phenomenal performance in Search and Control over the major. He was a fantastic player for them. He did well, and then all of a sudden you're like, all right, well, I mean, the rest of these bozos, they like, is it a money thing? I don't know. I really don't know. And Toronto's been that org, like think of like the Brack situation last year, or there's just so many little scummy things that go on, and I just think that this is just another
Yeah, but
chapter in
you
the
would
book
think
of.
that's like that scummy stuff's kind of like the upper management. I feel like this is something that Marky B would be in charge of as kind of the coach and not
I,
the upper
I don't
management,
know.
unless
It
it
just
was something to do with
it makes
money or sponsor. Like, I don't know, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting change. I mean, Insight's definitely not a bad player. He is a European player, so now they have a they have the 4-man European lineup, the Marky B wet dream, but like, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Every time Toronto made a roster change last season, they turned out better.
yeah. We'll see. We shall see. I think it's dumb. I think it's a bad idea. Actually,
Yeah. Pretty much
and
everyone's been saying it's a bad idea, but that's because like everyone in the scene is friends with Zinni in some way or another. So
I don't even think it's that though. I mean,
I mean, he
honestly,
wasn't performing bad
he's
either.
he's performing the best on his team. Like I don't know what else they got to do. I don't know. I maybe there's a chemistry issue or something. Maybe there's something behind the scenes going. You're probably right in that regard, but I mean, like I- honestly, if I was a pro team right now, I would be like licking my chops, trying to get old methods on my team. Especially some of these teams that are struggling with the AR position. I would be shopping right now if I was a
No
CDL
Zinni, no
team.
Winnie.
No Zenny, no Winnie. That is absolutely right. Um, so yeah, I we had to talk about that because like it's just it
Yeah.
blows my mind. Blows my mind. Now, as far as the game, Thieves versus Toronto, um, yeah, I mean Thieves obviously play really inconsistently, but I mean this is just case in point. Like, hey, by the way, whenever TJ's on, they're hot. Whenever Temp's able to like just kind of do his thing, they're hot. Whenever Kenny just plays consistently, they're hot. Whenever and Slasher, I mean he's the most consistent player on the team. I'll say that 100%. But I mean, in 44 COD, if you aren't firing on all cylinders, you're gonna lose games. And
Yep.
the
100%.
thieves are inconsistent at best for sure.
Yeah, I
And
think one of the surprising things too is Slasher has a higher engagement per minute than Temp does in the hard points. That's kind of that was something that was interesting
well,
to
I
find
mean,
out.
they also play two different roles, right? So Slasher, he will get in the point if need be. He can play that objective AR. He likes to sit by there and everything, make sure he can get the white time, all that stuff. Temp is always like, you know, trying to do route man stuff. He's trying to, secure spawns. He's trying to like, you know, cut off, pinch or, watch a flank or something like that. Which is why he has the stats that he has. Um, he wins his ones. He makes good plays whenever they need to be made. And I know a lot of people on Twitter were like calling for him to get benched, and I was like, why?
No, that'd be crazy.
He's one of the pieces that actually works on the
Temp,
roster.
yeah, Temp. I don't think Temp's the issue with that roster
No, I
personally.
I 100% with all my heart, and I've said this I don't know how many times. I will blame this on TJ until the day I die. That kid is inconsistent. He's been inconsistent for the past 3 years. Every optic fan in the room watching this is gonna agree with me. They're nodding their heads right now. They're like, yeah, TJ kind of shit the bed for us a lot in BO4. Modern Warfare, same deal. Immortals Optic was they kind of needed TJ to perform, and whenever he didn't perform, they were kind of like, well, what happened? I was like, what do you mean, what happened? There's the problem. And it's not that he's a bad player. He's just really inconsistent. Some days he shows up to play. Other days he's like, nah, man, I'm just gonna throw. Um, so yeah, it's just this game, this whole major for the Thieves. Uh, Same story, same old TJ, same old. Whatever org owns Slasher, TJ and Kenny for right now. I don't know. I hope that next year, uh, there's a little bit more flexibility in the rosters with roster mania and expansion and all that stuff, and we're gonna see some sparks fly. I would doubt that these guys are playing together next year. So, I'm ready to talk about the start of dominance with the subliners, though. If you're ready.
Yeah, we can move on to that. I believe it's the start of Saturday. We had New York Subliners taking on the LA Guerrillas. They delivered them a swift 3-1 victory. Then we had Chicago taking the LA Thieves. That was a bit of a grudge rematch. Chicago takes that pretty comfortably 3-1 as well. So both teams looking good, you would think, moving into the last match on Saturday, New York versus Chicago. And Chicago get absolutely fucking bodied.
Yeah,
I
Chicago
mean, they
Chicago did get
played
bodied.
they played some of the same maps they had played against LA Thieves, so maybe like New York got some time to like they obviously were watching that match, so they could might have been able to point out some things that they could counter in Chicago's strategy during that time that maybe helped them early on in the series. But Chicago just looked really flat, and New York just looked really good.
Yeah, they looked absolutely disgusting. Like it was a bloodbath, 100%. And I know it almost all falls on the shoulders of Clayster. Almost all of that happens because Clayster has been beating Optic longer than anybody else in the league. Nobody else knows the ins and out of anybody else, any of these other players in the league than Clayster. He's probably among the most cerebral players in the league, and I mean he just showed it right there. He literally made Chicago his bitch. All four of them, Dashy, Scump, you know,
I
Formal,
mean, it wasn't
Envoy.
a
It
one-man
was
show. Clayster definitely had some help. Diamond Con absolutely went off that series against Chicago.
oh sure,
Kasem and Mac did their job splendidly. And I mean, this was a huge turnaround because you just look at 2 days prior, Thursday, New York got absolutely bodied by Chicago. They lost 3-0. And now here on Saturday, they beat them 3-0 in what I would consider an even more dominant display than Chicago had against them just 2 days prior.
sure,
It's insane to think about. So I'm not sure. Like obviously we say COD's like day to day, but good lord, how day to day, match to match is that?
sure.
Uh, just insane. And
Yeah,
then yeah, you're gonna say?
yeah. So I mean, to see the subliners just tear through LA, well, it was LAG, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. So they were lucky to be here on Saturday. They were happy to be there on Saturday. Um, you know, LAG, we were like, all right, same old story. Subliners dropped around against them, whatever. But I mean, after Saturday, that put a lot of doubts on a lot of people's heads. That started something that I mean is still kind of going on, and actually I really do think that it's because of some of these crazy matchups that a lot of the teams were pushing for the XM4 to get GA'd. So was it this partially? I would imagine that a lot of these matchups where it was like yeah, they probably weren't supposed to do that well. People are gonna probably blame the XM4 for that. So
Yeah. I mean, you look at four of the You look at three out of the four last matches that we had were a 3-0. And I mean, obviously the last match was a best of 9, so wasn't very likely that was going to be a 3-0. But I mean, New York, Chicago, that was a 3-0. Moving on to Sunday, we had Dallas versus Atlanta the first time around in the winners finals. That was a 3-0 for Atlanta. Then you look at Dallas versus New York in the losers finals. That was a 3-0 for Dallas. And then we move on to the grand finals. The one thing we predicted, we saw was a best of 9. We're like, yeah, no way is Atlanta FaZe losing this.
No,
We
not.
had them going up against Chicago.
Right.
That was not the case. They were up against Dallas, but they won that 5-2. I mean,
yeah, this was
I as long as these grand finals are a best of 9, it's going to be incredibly difficult for teams to beat Atlanta FaZe in them. Until teams like catch up to them in S&D.
right.
Because
And
they are just not losing.
yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, you got a guy like Celium on your team who is also one of the most cerebral players in the league, um, who is an S&D mastermind. You've got Abizi and Simp who just don't lose gunfights. They win their ones, 100%. Abizi wins his ones, twos, threes, and then sometimes his fours. Um, and then all Arcees has to do is just play anchor. Be like, yeah, all right, cool. While you guys are having fun over there, I'm just gonna go get spawns first real quick. No big deal. Don't pay any attention to me. And I mean, stats showed. Simp played out of his mind. Abizi played out of his mind. Like they were just unbelievable. And then like we saw the same thing last year. They were a good search team last year. Now they're a great search team. And it just blows my mind how insane these guys are. Because I mean, like Dallas is a good team, right?
Yeah.
We don't say like Dallas is bad or anything like that, but they humbled them in this best of 9. They humbled Dallas. Like Dallas was able to like piece up 2
on
maps.
the weekend, Atlanta's map count against Dallas is 8-2.
Yeah, yeah. So it's what sucks is that like Atlanta is now way ahead of everybody else. And it's going to be the same old story as last year. Atlanta started out really hot, way ahead of everybody else. Dallas was able to pull things together whenever they made the transition to online, and I mean, they had an elite squad and they won champs and all of that. But I mean, they had to go through FaZe for it, and I think that this new FaZe roster is just even better for some reason. I mean, like, blows my mind that it's even better, and I just don't see them losing. I don't.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be. It's going to take a team to be on point to take down this FaZe lineup.
No doubt, no doubt.
But I want to get your opinion on the best of 9 final, since I know that this was a bit of a hot topic amongst kind of the pros and I think some of the spectators. I liked the best of 9 finals that I liked it better when they didn't just give a random map 1 win to a team. I think that makes more sense from a spectator's perspective if it's just like a straight up B of 9 and not one team starting out 1 map up. With that being said, I think ideally it should be double elim with a bracket reset. I'm like some of the idea around why it's not a bracket reset, like why it's not 2 best of 5s. Like people were speculating that it's because viewers are too dumb to understand that, but that's the point of the fucking broadcast. You explain shit to people.
Right,
So
exactly.
I'm not sure like why they're like the CDL is kind of just being lazy. Like they just don't want to explain stuff to their viewers, and they decide to explain like the weird things that they realistically shouldn't be. Uh, and that's kind of one of the biggest things that I think I have with the broadcast. I mean, you look at kind of like the NBA or the NFL, and if you're to watch either football or basketball be played at professional level without having ever played it before, you're going to be confused as hell. And it's the same for a video game. If you've never played that video game before and you're watching a professional play it with a specific rule set and whatnot, you're going to be fucking confused.
Yeah, but the other
But
thing that we
the
oh
reason
god.
being that it's so much easier to kind of pick up basketball or pick up football and the rule set is because you have commentators taking the time to explain things. Like if there's a flag on the play or something, and the referee does whatever his fucking hand signals or
Right.
whatnot, the broadcast is going to skip to a point in the recording and show the viewer exactly where that penalty is being called and why. Or if there's an interesting play being made on the field, such as like, oh, these blockers block this guy to create this hole for the running back to like go through the center and get to a touchdown or get a couple yards, they're gonna draw lines and show that and explain it to the viewer. We don't have anything like that in the CDL, and it would be amazing if we had that for most certainly S&D, being able to draw like you have. I don't know if you've watched I Hold Shift's playbook, where he literally goes into a pro game and he'll draw the 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 play that they're making in S&D, like the route they ran, where they're kind of posting up to cut off certain angles. And it's very similar to kind of if you've ever played like a Madden game, like all of the little arrows or lines that you see when you're picking kind of the play that you want to run either on offense or defense. It's very similar to that. And I think that's a great way to help viewers understand why players are going to certain spots. It's just there's so much explanation that they can do in such creative ways that they just aren't with the broadcast. Like honestly, the broadcast for me is one of the biggest downfalls of Call of Duty esports. It's just not up to par.
Yeah, I agree. Well, so they also face a really hard challenge, in comparison to like football or basketball. Football is probably the easiest to broadcast because, they run a play, it's like 5 seconds, and then, they wait like 45 seconds to run another play. And you kind of
Yeah.
have to fill like all your dead time and all that, run commercials, like do instant replays, all that fun stuff. Basketball is a little different. You can kind of like, oh, let's just put the instant replay of LeBron James, posturizing somebody like on the side or like really quickly, and then they go back to the action and all that stuff. But basketball, for the most part, it can afford to take a few second breaks or something like that. COD is like you kind of have to have ADHD to like really understand what's going on with the esport. Like either that or you've just played for that long and you kind of know. And that makes, the new viewer, the person who's like, "Oh, what's this? I've played Call of Duty before. Like I love zombies or whatever." That's the kind of person you want in the audience to have a good idea of what's going on in the game. And it's pretty hard whenever they're all over the place. The observers are just changing between, you know, uh, perspectives all the time because somebody goes down or whatever. It's fast. It's really fast, and it's hard to do anything with it. I mean, I think the broadcasters do just a good enough job, kind of keeping up with the action, but at the same
I
time,
think
like, who knows?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some improvements that the community. Like one thing that League of Legends does, and I know League of Legends is different from COD.
Yeah,
There's not gunfights happening every minute. There's not team fights happening every minute or every second
right.
in League of Legends as there is in COD. But one of the things they do is they'll enlarge the mini map to point something out, or they'll show an instant replay and they'll draw to show certain things happening that we might not have seen the first time around. And then they'll pan and they'll kind of like shrink the game, have it like in the lower right hand corner or something, and they'll have the replay large. I think that might not that's not something that COD necessarily would do, especially not on hardpoint. It's something they could probably do in control or in S&D when they're kind of doing the breaks or even during the stupid kill cam at the end. I mean, you have probably like 20 seconds in between rounds of S&D. That's just downtime realistically of like, oh, the final kill cam. Okay, the countdown before the round starts. Okay, the players are now running to get to their positions, and it's there's probably like 5 seconds before where they're at on the map actually really freaking matters. So S&D is definitely something they could do it in. With hardpoint, I think what something they could do in is bring enlarge the map and shrink kind of the plays happening in the hard point for the anchors and show kind of the rotations happening on the map to point out like, hey, okay, look at player number 4 on the mini map with it enlarged and not just shrunken on the side. I think there's a ton of things that they can do with the broadcast to just make it so much better for new viewers to understand the game that they're just not, either because they haven't thought of it or because they don't have the technical ability to do it yet. For me, I started watching professional League of Legends like as soon as I started playing the game, and before I even like really dove into League of Legends, I was already watching the professional broadcasts, and I know that helped immensely with my understanding of the game because of how they were able to explain the concepts of what was going on the map just so well.
Right.
And that's something that COD has just failed at, and they need to improve on because it can be a good spectator esport if they just are able to explain the concepts in a way that doesn't feel force fed and in a way that feels natural and actually adds to the gameplay instead of taking you away from like what the
What's going
actual
on?
focus
Right.
is.
I think there's a couple ways to fix this or to envision a better broadcast. First thing, the observer team. I mean, they just need to double the size of it at this point. And one person needs to be like a free cam, kind of third person view, put up the map, all that stuff. The other person is just trying to catch action happening in the mini map and then swap over to it. If they can get two observers on or even three observers on to switch over to that, and then just have a producer with a little bit of sense to say,
I think the biggest thing is to maybe get a producer. Like I'm not sure who the producer is. I think it might.
it's
I'm not
internal.
100% certain.
It's internal.
I
All
know I know it's internal, but I'm not sure if I know like the person
oh,
personally. Like
who
I've
it
worked with
is?
them before. But I think it would be really helpful to maybe have them sit down with an experienced COD pro and just talk to them a ton about the game so that they get a sense of where the camera needs to be. Since they're technically, aren't they, like the producer's supposed to technically kind of be directing, hey, this camera, okay,
Yeah,
now switch to this
you switch
camera.
scenes and all that stuff, and
Yeah.
you have to figure out where you need to be as far as like, oh well, this is what's happening right now. All right, we can go to this chant, or we can go to this scene. All right, now we can switch over to this scene. All right, now we can switch over to this scene. We can switch back to this
Yeah, so I
scene.
think that's something like that, kind of having that dialogue and that uh, improved understanding of the game would be something that would definitely benefit a producer
Well, I
for the
mean,
league.
I don't think you have to have, sage advice from the COD gods to produce. I don't think that that's
No,
necessary. I
no, but you need to have like I think a deeper understanding of what's important in a game than just like your everyday Joe.
Well, I mean, the game is not that complicated, Like you've got like in hardpoint, the hardpoints rotate the same ways. You can tell on the mini map, oh hey, by the way, look at this. There's three guys heading out the back. They're about to break this shit from the back. All right, let's focus on that real quick. Pull up the mini map for that. Oh man, they're about to hit a huge flank right now. Let's see if they trade out or whatnot. Let's see if the other team picks up on it. You can pull up the mini map. Then you can free cam whenever it's like all 8 players are all gun battling real quick, and you can kind of see what happens with the trades and all of that. Um, so I think that they just need to get a little bit more creative, and I don't think it comes down to, hey, like you don't know how the game is played, like you need to talk to the pros. More or less, you do have a good understanding of how the game's played. You just need to find a better avenue instead of just having, oh well, this is the first person cam. Yeah, I mean they got more response from the first person cam in the beginning of Modern Warfare. I don't remember if you remember in the very very beginning of the
I do
CDL,
remember.
they had a lot of like third person to first person to all this other crazy nonsense, and I don't think it was executed well. I think that you're right. With 4v4, we can kind of slow it down and be like, all right, yeah, let's talk about this. But I mean, there's always something going on, so it's hard to tell what's important with what's going on and what's not. Uh, but I would imagine that a decent producer would be like, yeah, this is like a kill out in the middle of nowhere is not what we want to be focusing on right now. We want to talk about like what just happened with the play or something like that that made it so now the only action that's happening is some random
Yeah.
kill. So
Yeah, I think it's something that the casters could definitely work on too. I don't think it's just a producer or
sure.
a
Well, I
thing.
mean, you give the producer more tools to work with, and then the caster should just shift. I mean, none of those guys have
Yeah.
like scripts for the most part. They're all just kind of doing it, ad hoc. So,
Hmm.
I mean, you you give them more things to play with, and they're gonna figure it out. It's just a matter of time. Yeah, you could sit down in a room together and be like, "Hey, by the way, we're adding these new things to our tool belt," and then they'd be like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. I wonder what I could say whenever you do that." I mean, I don't think that. I mean, now that I've actually done all of these jobs, for Buckeye Cod, um, it's it's one of those things that's like I can see where the limitations are. I can see where um, the CDO could go with it, and I could also see why they do what they do now. So, um, I think the broadcast will evolve as time goes on. I hope that they get rid of the game fuel cans, though. That's probably my biggest complaint.
Just the static game
It
fuel cans on the
looks
chests.
stupid. It looks dumb.
They need that
Why?
ad placement. Need that ad
I
placement.
get ad placement, but I mean, damn, like is the logo that bad that they can't just put that on the side or somewhere, or like or God forbid they I don't know the broadcasting team they just have game fuels that game fuel gives to them and then they just set them up, like they did last year. Like it's just ridiculous. I mean, I guess it gets us talking about it, but it looks stupid. It's at the expense of the CDL.
I mean, I've been trying to live a healthy lifestyle, so I'm not having no game
All
fuels.
right, well, some of us are demons at COD, Nick.
Yeah,
Don't
my
play on the
old
Wii.
man hands can't keep up with it. Yeah,
uh,
I think that's enough of that conversation,
sure, for
if you're
sure.
good. One thing I do want to touch on, so I think we touched on this very briefly, but XM4 is GA'd. So that's another AR gone. We're now with the QBZ. QBZ got GA'd in the European amateur region, so probably only a matter of time before the pros end up GAing that.
Oh my
And
gosh,
we're
yeah.
just in this awful cycle of everything being OP. And so it brings up kind of like the Incredibles question. If everyone is super, no one is. And that's kind of where we're at with the guns right now. Everything can be OP, quote unquote, under the pros definition. Therefore, nothing is really OP.
I think they're
It's just
really seeking.
every gun is too good for, I guess, having an actual competitive skill gap because you can just make every gun not recoil, shoot lasers, do insane damage. So you're just in kind of this state of like, okay, we just have to ban everything. Like what is the end goal here, really? Like, obviously, I think everyone would agree we should just go back to a pick 10 system. That would
Yeah,
solve pretty much all of the current issues with all of the GAs that we're experiencing. Um, but like, do we just for this season? Do we just ban all attachments and just play with the guns raw out of like
I
just
don't know what they.
straight up level 0 guns?
I don't know what the
Because
end game
then
is.
you'd probably open the possibility of, I mean, the AK wouldn't need to be banned anymore. None of the ARs would need to be banned. The SMGs would finally probably be in a SMG state. Like, is that just what you do at this point, or do you just keep on letting pros get rid of every single gun until they're just playing with fucking pistols?
I don't know. I really don't know. And speaking of pistols, I mean they already GA'd two of them, so like everybody's gonna run around with a Diamatti. Is that what the
Wait,
the
they
entertainment esport
GA'd the
is?
Magnum and they GA'd.
Oh yeah, they've been GA'd for a long time.
I didn't know the Magnum was. I just thought people didn't use it.
No, it's a two shot. Like it was like the oh god, what gun was that in Black Ops
The
4?
Deagle? Oh, and
No, no,
Black
no.
Ops
Black Ops
4?
4. Um See, the Deagle was a thing all ass Modern Warfare. You could have used it if you wanted to. Nobody used it. Why? Because the other pistols were pretty fair and balanced in comparison to the M4 and the MP5. So I think that what needs to happen is, yeah, I think a pick 10 system would work. I think that would fix a lot of problems. I think the other
I
thing that
think
would fix
pick 10
problems,
and going back to hit scan for
yeah, hit
for
scan,
multiplayer,
hit scan would
because
be
that
good,
solves hit scan solves the ghost bullet issue,
right?
doesn't it? I do believe. I think it
Yeah,
also you get rid of that really annoying thing with bullet velocity because everyone just wants faster bullet velocity,
yeah.
so
So they
their
could turn
guns
the
are
gun to
more
hit
hit
scan. Yeah,
scanny. I think bullet velocity is fine in your BRs, makes sense in your BRs.
sure.
Does not make so much sense in regular multiplayer COD. Uh, at least that's kind of my opinion on it. Especially if you have attachments that can change bullet velocity. Maybe it's like BO4, it's a different story. You didn't have attachments, at least to my knowledge, that could change bullet velocity. You didn't have all these stats that you see that you could edit. So uh, I think it's just an issue that the elimination of the pick 10 system has just exacerbated to a point where we're seeing this issue of just infinite GAs. That's just not a good state for competitive.
No, I definitely don't disagree with that. I think that GAs are gonna just destroy the community at this point. It's impossible for a new player to come into the game and be like, oh well, like, how do I play the esport? And they're like, well, it's really simple. We play hardpoint, search, and control. Oh, by the way, here's the giant list of ever-changing rules, so that way we can satiate the pros. Who, like, at the end of the day, who and why are they making all these decisions? And why are things? I don't know. It's just like the current state is bad, and I think Pixel system would fix it. Hit scan would definitely fix it. Um, I think that at the end of the day, the big root of the problem is they're searching for that old COD feel, and none of the guns feel like old COD. You know what I'm saying? Like old COD, guns shot a lot slower than they do realistically. And Call of Duty's always been one of those. It's like, yeah, our guns are like super realistic. This is how the gun shoots in real life and all of that. And everybody's like,
When has COD stated that?
they've always done that. That for Modern Warfare, that was like their big thing. They were like, oh yeah, we
Oh,
got the sounds
yeah.
right, we got all this like
Well,
the bullet
I mean,
velocities right.
the
We
last the last Modern Warfare game was the only one I've ever played. I've only ever played Black Ops games. And to me, Black Ops and Call of Duty as a franchise is an arcade shooter.
sure, yeah,
It's
I
not
will not disagree
supposed
with
to
that.
be realistic.
Well,
I mean,
Cold
Treyarch,
War.
I don't think has ever really been super realistic. I mean, they used futuristic weapons. Yeah, they were based on things that were being developed at the time, but
Right. Well, I'm saying that with Activision Blizzard, the direction that Call of Duty is going currently is all of the guns are trying to be more realistic. Cold War has shown that, Modern
no,
Warfare has shown that.
it's not the direction COD should be going.
They have higher rounds per minute, which causes all these problems whenever you get into these servers that are only like 20 tick rates or whatever, and you got super bullets and all these other like crazy problems. And
Bro, we
and
look at what, 8 years ago, we had the fastest shooting gun I've ever seen in the Scorpion Evo, and you could put a rapid fire in that thing and we didn't have issues.
well, I mean
Like,
that's the
how the hell do you have a gun that's shooting like 2,000 rounds a minute,
I,
not having issues?
I
And
think
nowadays we have a gun that shoots, what, 600 rounds a minute and it has an issue?
that's what I'm saying. I think there's a lot of pampering that goes on, and I'm kind of tired of it. Kind of tired. I don't know. It's
I've
just
been tired.
it's like X and Force GA'd, all the muzzle attachments for the 74 U are GA'd now. So most people are like, yeah, you got to run your 74U with only 4 attachments now, dog. And I was like, no, I'm gonna put on tape mags at least because I mean, it's just you can't just keep doing this, you know.
The thing that's crazy with the GAs too is AK was the first thing that was GA'd.
Yeah.
But was the AK better than the XM4?
Yes, but
Well,
marginally.
now people are saying the QBZ is better than the XM4 because it's got a higher headshot ratio. So they don't even know what's fucking good. Like at this point, like they're just banning stuff because they realized, wait, this was actually better than what we were using prior. Maybe like I'm pretty sure I heard Octane say that in a video. He's like, yeah, we GA'd the XM4, but the QBZ it's probably better than the XM4. Like, all right, well, then why the fuck wasn't it GA'd
Yeah,
before the XM4? Like, you just have all this stupidity going on right now, and it's insane.
I think it's just it might just be noise. It might just be like, oh yeah, let's just get the community outraged again because that's a one way to grow the community. I don't agree with it, but I mean, if it gets results, it gets results. I don't know. There's
Yeah.
it's a mess. That's what it is. It's a mess.
Well, yeah. Well, let's talk about something new that's good.
Sure.
This is a new good. New maps.
New maps potentially.
Well, maybe one new map. It's most likely Apocalypse is getting added into the map pool in favor of removing Crossroads. And we players were looking at adding Express Control. They played it. They think it's too fast. They think they would need more lives, but I think it's fine, to be honest.
I think it's better
Um,
than garrison control for
I think
sure.
it's better than a lot of the control maps, to be honest, even if you're losing. Like, what was their issue? Their issue didn't really register with me. It was like, oh, you lose lives too fast, but like that's a like that like I don't understand how that's an issue in control because then it just like I guess you're just playing TDM before you're getting to like cap the points or something like that.
Which
But
is the whole game mode anyway. Like,
yeah,
I
so
don't
I'm
know.
not really understanding the issue. I watched Optic play I think it like 3 different times and I really enjoyed watching Express play out. Um, so yeah, I'm not too certain. I hope it gets added in favor of some of the current control maps like Checkmate, like Garrison. Like get one of those out of there. Raid's fine. I think Express is a really good control map. I liked where the points were. I think they made relatively logical sense.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I
and
think I think it's a good map.
I enjoyed watching it play. I guess I would have to hear more of a reason from the pros, but to me it looked good. Apocalypse looked good
Apocalypse looked great actually.
for Hardpoint. I know I'd said, oh, maybe we could get Pines working, but Pines is too big.
Yeah, no,
But I'm
Pine's too
glad
big.
that see that they're adding stuff, and I think it's good that we have these kind of weak break points in the season with the stages where players can look back, assess the state of the game from the prior stage, and then implement new changes moving into a new stage where we'll have a consistent kind of state of the game for a month. And then we'll have kind of the time to open the discussion again for future changes throughout kind of the season
Yeah,
with that break in between each stage. I think that's really good.
I like that. And I mean, if they would just make the ban list and the GA list the same, and they changed it after every major, then I would be fine. I think COD would be in a really good state at that point. Regardless of what they ban or what they don't ban or what everybody's going to bitch about, because they're going to bitch about something regardless. I do think that Apocalypse Hardpoint should take place at Crossroads. There's already way too much controversy concerning Crossroads, um, and I mean Apocalypse is flatly a better map than Crossroads for Hardpoint. It sucks. I think that Crossroads, uh, it's fun for like pubs or anything, but it does feel a lot like Nuketown. I will give it that sort of got the same sort of vibe. Especially with the that new P4 that they had, which was terrible. Express Control is better than Garrison Control, and the reason why is because I feel like offense and defense are both kind of 50-50 on it. like there's not like, oh well, this is just a god spot or whatever. There's interesting routes to run on it, and I think that the pros need to give it a little bit more of a chance before they're like, yeah, this isn't it. And if it isn't it, then they still need to be actively searching for a map to replace Garrison, because Garrison is bad news. Like,
Yeah, and I
like
think what they could do with the control is they could just add it as a fourth map to the control pool, let them test it like all of stage 2, and then come up with a decision. Because like there's only 3 control maps, they can just add it there. I mean, we had 4 control maps in BO4. I think that was a better state for the game than with only 3. So I think that's an option.
yeah, I don't know. I 4 would be fine if Garrison still wasn't in the rotation, but I mean, like Garrison is like fundamentally like broken for control because there's a whole choke point. Same thing with Search. There's a whole choke point that the defense spawns on the side of, and they're able to just kind of have their way with the attacking team. Um, it is an unforgiving map, and I don't see any point in time where Garrison, aside from Hardpoint, I think Garrison Hardpoint works fine. Um, but that also uses more of the map. So, but for control and for search, Garrison's got to go. At least for control. Search, I mean, it is what it is. I've seen wackier search maps for sure. So, I would like Express Search. That'd be fun. That'd be great, actually.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. I'm pretty sure that like Express Search is like a guarantee to get it added. I just haven't seen scrims of it, so I think
That's what I'm saying. I
that's why.
I just don't think that they're going to do Express Search. I don't know why. It was great in BO2. It
It'd
worked
be
in BO2.
really weird if they didn't do Express Search.
Two Big Mac slums. Hmm. Love me some slums. Prediction
Okay,
time?
well, yep, predictions time. Rapid fire predictions time.
Let's do it.
Since I believe we're probably about an hour 20 into this podcast,
Good
so
guess.
it's about time to wrap it up. Starting off, we got Atlanta versus New York Subliners. Both you and me, I think we're saying 3-1 Atlanta in that matchup.
Yep.
All right. Florida, Seattle. I'm saying Florida takes it 3-2. I think it's going to be a little bit closer. I don't know why,
Nah,
but
Seattle's
yeah,
dog 3-1, and that's
I
generous.
do think they're dog, but sometimes like Florida's just a little inconsistent sometimes.
That's why I gave him the 1.
Yeah. LA Thieves versus Toronto. This is the first thing we're going to disagree on. I'm taking the LA Thieves 3-2 over Toronto. Obviously, Toronto has insight coming in for methods. We do have a bit of a meta shift that I don't know if it's going to favor Toronto. I think it will probably, well, I think it favors both of these teams because the only teams that were not in favor of the meta change were New York, Atlanta, and Seattle. So those are the teams to kind of look at to see if they are better with
Right.
this meta shift or not because they thought they were going to be worse with this meta shift.
This is no, like, I do want to say this. This is no disrespect to methods with me picking Toronto over the Thieves. I just think that the Thieves love disrespecting teams and then getting walloped on, just like in the major. They probably went in there thinking, oh, LAG, all right, this is free, 3-0, easy. They're probably going to think the same thing with Toronto. Oh, they dropped methods. What the hell are they doing? They don't know what they're talking about. And then all of a sudden they get whopped because they make dumb mistakes because they're underestimating the opponent. I mean, these are still great COD players, and I think that the Thieves are one of those teams that are just going to do that over and over again. They're going to perform terribly against teams that they shouldn't perform against, and that's why I think that Toronto takes this one.
Okay. So little disagreement there. Going to a game 5 nonetheless, hopefully. So it should be interesting.
Sure.
Then we got Minnesota versus Paris. I'm saying 3-2 for Minnesota. You're saying 3-1. Either way, we think Minnesota's going to take it in the end. Just a little bit closer of a series. I think it might be. I think I have a lot of 3-2s. I think coming into this first week of stage 2, but I think that has something to do with just a lot of the inconsistencies with some of the
Sure.
teams, and also you do have a meta shift that we've had. Even though I don't think it's going to change much, it's still something I guess that we have to consider.
Yep.
Moving on to our first Saturday matchup, Chicago versus Paris. We're both having Chicago take this over Paris. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Minnesota versus Florida. We both have Minnesota taking this over Florida. You have a 3-1. I have a 3-2.
If it went to Game 5, I think I would actually give it to Florida.
You'd give
Interestingly
it to
enough.
Florida just because
Interestingly
of Big
enough,
Wake.
I, I just the inconsistencies that Minnesota's had recently. I don't think that they can close out on Map 5 right now. I just don't think they have enough confidence. Um,
Yeah. I think out of the matchups that are happening this weekend, this is the one that I think could definitely go either way.
sure, for sure.
I think it's probably the biggest one.
Speaking of ones that
Uh,
won't go either way,
yeah, Seattle versus Dallas, 3-0 Dallas, see you
yeah,
Seattle.
yeah, hot 3-0.
Sunday. We got LAG versus London Royal Ravens. Both of us are taking LAG 3-2 over the Ravens. That's also that one that should be interesting. If LAG struggle with the Ravens, and we don't really see much life from the Ravens in the latter halves of stage 2, then I think LAG, like our predictions with LAG were kind of correct. Our initial assumptions with LAG were kind of
Sure.
correct. This realistically, based on their current performances, should not be a struggle. So if they do struggle with the London Royal Ravens, then that's definitely something to take note of.
I think they're going to
Uh,
struggle for sure. And it's not because London's that good. I just think that, I mean, you've got an unknown
Certain
team
teams
coming
have
in.
struggled with London when they realistically shouldn't. I mean, you look at Dallas, that went all the way game 5. I think there's a couple in there, a couple other matchups in there as well, where certain teams struggled with them when they probably shouldn't have. But yeah, other matchups, we got Atlanta versus Toronto. Easy 3-1 for Atlanta, I
Easy.
think.
Hot.
Anytime Atlanta, I think, loses, if it's not against a Dallas or an Optic, it's going to be a upset, a
Yeah,
large upset. I think anytime they lose currently, it's going to be an upset. I think if they if it's not against Dallas and Chicago, it's going to be an unexpected upset.
for
I
sure.
think Dallas and Chicago have the potential upset, uh,
True.
potential to upset them. But yeah, and then closing out the first week of stage 2, we have LA Thieves versus the New York Subliners, and this is, I think, the only other time we're differentiating on our predictions. I'm saying LA Thieves is going to take it 3-2 over New York. You're saying New York is going to take it 3-2 over LA Thieves. So you actually have LA Thieves going 0-2 this weekend.
Yep.
Oh,
I don't know if you want me to expound on that, but
I
well,
mean,
Subliners should win that. You have them going 2-0. So
I do have them going 2-0, and I have New York going 0-2. So I guess a bit of a difference in looks there. One of their New York's matches being Atlanta, though. But
right. Yeah, you don't
yeah,
really
I
expect.
definitely think this match is going to be interesting. Yeah, I think the reason I'm giving this one to LA Thieves is a little bit because of the LA Thieves, or because of New York being one of those teams that didn't want the meta change. I think this meta change could definitely hurt the roster in terms of Diamond Khan's performances, since he was definitely a very solid XM4 player. And now with him on the QBZ, or maybe he's going to be probably running the AK-74U on certain maps instead. How much is that going to affect his gameplay? That's something to look at. And we do have Hydra in the States now, so it'll be interesting to see when he comes into this roster. Their stage 1 performance was definitely good enough to not warrant a roster change, as we do see Hydra is going to be playing with New York Subliners Academy, replacing Glowfrosty on that roster. Obviously, because Hydra came to the States, he's got to play somewhere. That's just the one guy subbed out. Um, but yeah, uh, I think that's why I'm giving LA Thieves the edge here over New York. If there was no meta change, I would probably also go New York. I think I'm just maybe favoring LA Thieves a little bit here simply because of that meta shift.
Yeah, we'll see. I just really don't think that after their major performance that the Subliners are going to be one to roll over to the Thieves. I still think it's going to be a good game. They
I
both
mean,
are
I'm saying
solid
game
teams.
5. It's nowhere, no way, shape, or form them rolling over.
Well, that looks about it for stage 2, week 1.
All right. Well, I think you're right. I think that's going to wrap it up for here for us. Hope you guys all enjoyed the podcast. Hope you guys have a spectacular weekend. But that's going to be for it from us. We will see you guys next time.
Later.